Good evening, and welcome back to 31 Horror Nights. It's October 5th, and tonight's movie is Sinister, which ties with Insidious for the most generic horror movie title I've ever heard in my life. This one gets a 5 out of 10, which for me means I didn't care for it. It wasn't terrible, but it also wasn't very good. Now, first and foremost, I would like to formally apologize to the strangers. I mischaracterized your movie. Your film does not go crazy with the dark shots. This one does. It's insane. Like, people could be sitting around inside having a conversation during the day, and it's really dark. Like, it's like this family doesn't believe in turning on lights. There was so much of this movie where I was seriously looking at nothing. Nothing at all. There are a few, totally black shots in this movie for no reason. That was the most constant problem throughout the entire movie. About, at least 75% of the scenes were too dark. I wanted to get that out of the way right off the bat. Now, the plot of this movie is that there's this writer, played by Ethan Hawke. Him and his family moved to a new house, and they're moving there as research for a book he's going to be writing. He's one of those authors that writes about real crime, and they say that, he had this really big bestseller that was, what was it called, Kentucky Blood or something stupid like that in the past, and that was, a huge hit, and apparently he was able to uncover something the police missed, which, okay, but you can tell that he's just trying to hold on to that moment. That really was his 15 minutes of fame. They even acknowledge that in the movie. So he's been trying to capture that lightning in a bottle, and this time he thinks he's come across something that will, make a new bestseller. It's this house where there are 5 members of the family. 4 of them got hung in the tree in the backyard, and one of them, a little girl, disappeared. And the idea was that he was going to go there, investigate, see if he can write about it. While he's there, he finds a bunch of film reels in a box in the attic, and that shows not only, a video of the hanging murder, which clearly looks supernatural. There was also a bunch of other murders, some from 10, 20, 30, 40 years in the past. So, and these murders all are linked together by certain themes. They see symbols in the same one, and every single one of them has this one weird figure in it. The movie doesn't really give it a name until the very end. There's a scene where he comes across drawings of all of it, and every single one of them, that figure is labeled Mr. Boogie, which I personally think would be a better name for this movie than Sinister. Now, the story itself, honestly, is pretty good. It's the best thing about the movie. It's clever, it's well-paced, it has a lot of really good aha moments, or wow, you're screwed moments in it. That was the best part of the movie, and I think is what saved me from not disliking this movie more than I do. It had a good idea behind it, but the problem with this one is execution. One of the biggest problems with this, in terms of it being a horror movie, is just the amount of jump scares in it. This movie is way too heavy on the jump scares. And there are 2 types of jump scares. One where there's something happening inside the movie, like something falling over, or there's a thump, or someone screams. There's a loud noise that the characters hear and react to, as well as the people watching it. But then there's the type that's all over this movie, where they'll show something, and then the score will make a really loud noise, like a ching, or a bang, just something really loud to surprise the audience. That's the type of jump scare that I actually kind of find annoying, because it just makes me think, okay, we didn't think that this was scary enough, so we're just gonna add this. It especially sucks because they constantly do it over scares that would have been fine on their own. One of the things is that he takes a screen cap from one of the videos that shows the figure. It's from the video that with the tree that's outside the house, and you see that guy hiding in a bush. So he's holding out the picture in front of the same bush it is, and then he drops it, and then he sees that guy there. That could have worked if they didn't. The instant it happened, it almost seems like it happened before it happened, but it was probably the instant he lowered the picture, there was a loud noise. That could have been good even if they waited a split second for it. Let the audience look and see for at least a second what we're supposed to actually be scared of. Another thing with this movie is that I didn't really care for the main character. He wasn't bad, he wasn't annoying, but he just wasn't exactly the most likable kind of guy. He was obviously kind of full of himself. He was constantly chasing his past fame with that book that he wrote 10 years ago. He moves the family to a house where a murder took place and doesn't tell them about it. The wife asks at one point, please tell me that we're not at a place where a murder happened like 2 houses over. And then he says no. And then, of course, when him and his wife are arguing about it later, he says, well, you asked if it was 2 houses down from the murder. He actually does manage to come to his senses and be a little bit more likable at the end of the movie, but throughout most of it, he wasn't exactly my favorite. Another thing about the movie is the dialogue. There's just something off about it. It's not horrible, but some of it's like the uncanny valley of dialogue. It's almost the way that normal people talk, but not quite. There's a lot of scenes with this one cop who's like a fan of that bestseller that Ethan Hawke made, and they work together and he helps him out on the case. But whenever he's in, like, they have these conversations that I think are supposed to be funny, but I don't think they know why it's supposed to be funny because it's all just so weird. Before I go into spoilers, I just want to say Sinister isn't a terrible movie. It does have an interesting enough story to at least keep you watching until the very end, but there are a lot of things in it that I didn't really like. Now, I could totally imagine somebody else loving this movie, but personally, I didn't care for it. Now let's go into some spoilers. The story does get kind of clever towards the end. Now, there comes a point where he completely comes to his senses, he burns the tape, and he gets his family out of that house right then. Like, they don't even pack, they just leave. Now, that sounds like, usually if someone did that in any other horror movie, things would be fine. But in this one, they actually did something really clever with it. He was talking with this occult expert who worked at a college, and they were talking about a demon, and his worshippers kind of fit the MO of all the murders that were in the tapes. And they were saying that in the old days, they believed that the images of that demon were enough to make him, like, start leeching into the real world, which is exactly what happened with the house. Right after he started looking at the tape, weird stuff kept happening. That I thought was kind of clever. So they wouldn't have been fine if they just left the house, because it wasn't the house that was the problem, it was the tapes. And another thing they did was that the cop who was helping him out calls him, and then he says he figured out that with all the murders that were on the tapes, every single one of the families previously lived in the house where the last murder took place. And that implies, of course, that they found the tapes and they looked at the tapes and that caused the demon to come out. And they just moved out of that house back to their old house. So that means that they're next and it's going to happen soon. That was a really good, like, moment of, uh-oh. That was pretty well done. And then we got to the ending. And at the very end, it plays out just like all the other tapes. In all the other tapes, it's the kid that went missing that actually did the murders. The demon is the one that influenced them to do it, and it's there, but it's not them who actually did it. It was the children. So the daughter kills the rest of the family, and then she gets taken away by the demon, and the movie ends, and you see that the box of tapes is in the attic. Now, that would have been a fine ending, except then the demon sticks his face in front of the camera, there's a loud noise, and that's what they end the movie on. They end the movie on a really cheap jump scare. That's something you really don't want to do. Now, it would have been fine if they just, like, if, like, the lights went out on the tape or something, or they even had this thing, like, once all the children's were done with the murders, they looked to the camera and made, like, the shh motion with their fingers. I actually think it would have been a lot better if the demon did show up in front of the camera, but there wasn't a loud noise, and he just, like, made the shh thing with his finger, and then the movie ended. That would have been a lot better than the cheap jump scare they ended on. I feel bad giving this movie an overall negative rating because there are really good ideas in it. There is so much potential in this movie. But throughout a lot of it, I was just thinking of ways that it could have been done better, and that's not a good thing. In the end, I didn't really like it. I'm not bashing it, I'm not calling it terrible, but I don't think I really want to see it again, and I wouldn't exactly recommend it to everybody else. I'll see you guys tomorrow.